Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Rounding the Bases, presented by Community America Credit Union, investing in you. My name is Joel Goldberg. Shout out, as always, to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. If you are in the market to be hiring someone, looking for a job, looking for a resource, just give them a shout. Check out their website. You can tell them I sent you or not. Doesn't make a difference one way or another. But I love to partner with them because of the energy they have, the knowledge they have, the good people that they are. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. I've been mentioning this lately. I want to keep doing it just because it helps. If you listen to this podcast, if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify and you have not followed the podcast yet, it helps us tremendously. So if you would do that, I would be extremely grateful. Also, check out the new website, same website address, joelgoldbergmedia.com. New look, new brand, new rebrand. Very excited about that and all the information about the podcast, the speaking, and much, much more. The baseball travels on there. I want to get to today's guest and a tip of the cap to Melissa Vincent over at Pipeline for the introduction. My guest today is a celebrated entrepreneur who harnessed the power of partnership to make opportunity happen. She's the brilliant mind behind biotech and digital health's most cutting-edge initiatives, who has made it her mission to usher in the next gen of problem-solving standouts. Say hello to Maria Flynn, the president and CEO of Ambiologix, who is setting the world of STEM on fire. With a win-win mentality, she advances innovation from start to scale to sale, engineering success again and again and again. That sounds like a great formula. I know it's never as easy as it sounds. Welcome into Rounding the Bases, Maria.
Thank you so much. You make that sound so good.
Well, that is I was telling you before we came on that you are the expert at scaling, not me, but I learned early on that, yeah, I could write, I could do all these things, but it's so much better when I have someone that can do it with their full attention. And so that is my amazing executive assistant, Ashley, who puts all of this together. And, knowing people like Melissa and so many others, that's the beauty of networking, meeting more people. I was joking with you that I thought I knew everybody in Women Who Mean Business here in Kansas City. I probably know like 50, 60%, which means I have a lot more amazing women to interview. But I want to talk about your story and just kind of where it began too. I mean, like any successful entrepreneur, there's incredible evolution over time. How did you have the bug early on? How did this all get started?
I did have the bug early on. We just didn't call it entrepreneurship then. So, it starts with my family, and they were entrepreneurs and from a farming community about halfway between here and Denver. And my parents had their businesses, and how they made it work as their kids were part of their businesses. So I got to learn early how you solve problems, how you go after opportunities. And then I went the engineering path. So I got a technical foundation, which has served me very well. But I learned that I liked where technology and innovation intersected the opportunity. So I went back to business school. Cerner recruited me to the area, and that was a great experience. But then I had this urge that I really wanted to go build something from the ground up, which is what Orbis Biosciences let me do.
The farming background, being in a decent farming community, right? I mean, Hayes is more than obviously just a farming community. It's funny. You weren't using the word entrepreneurship back then, but when I think about entrepreneurship and innovation, and I was lucky enough to speak to a couple farming co-ops this past off season, and they have to stay up on technology. They have to stay up on innovation, and there's a bit of a dichotomy there. Bear with me on this one. Not everything relates back to baseball, though I tend to do that a pretty good amount because it's usually a good teaching tool. But baseball is such an old school, traditional institution that could be slow to change, but they have to change. And I feel like farming can kind of be the same way. I was blown away at just the amount of technology and how important that is to them, but also some of the resistance to that from some of these co-op members because, hey, our family has always done it this way before. Why should we have to change? And there's so much there in terms of convincing people and storytelling and explaining those whys. How much did that background for you growing up with that affect you?
Oh, it was huge. And Neil Patterson, the co-founder of Cerner, he would say farmers are some of the first entrepreneurs. So, the work ethic, the respect for Mother Nature transfers to, like, there are things out of your control. So you control the things that you can, and then you deal with the things that you can't control. But it was a great place to grow up and to go on to do entrepreneurship.
And your parents were involved in other things, if I see the research
Yes.
correct too, right? So how much did that influence you in terms of being at least aware of other things or diversifying a bit?
Yeah, it was great. And, when I was growing up, it was the farm aid years where a lot of farmers were going under. So we were very thankful that my parents had other businesses. They each had their own business, and then they had real estate. And so they, diversifying their interests and where they saw opportunity. So I was learning about make opportunity happen, as a kid through what they were doing and showing us and modeling. And when I talk to girls in middle school about going into STEM, one of the big things we talk about is if you can see it, you can be it. So, finding those, finding different people who have done different things and then choosing for yourself, how you want to form your path.
All right, let's talk a little bit about STEM, because there's another word, or I guess acronym in this case, that I know you were not talking about when you were growing up in Hayes, Kansas. I was not talking about it, by the way, in the suburbs of Chicago growing up either. Now it's everywhere. It's incredibly inspiring. When I go in to some of these schools, whether it be to speak for something real quick or delivering grant checks for the school district that I'm in, I'm blown away at what these kids know. I mean, it's beyond, okay, my kid could teach me a shortcut on my phone. Like, I'm getting to that age now. It's that these kids at 5, 6, 7 years old are being introduced to incredible innovation. They're going to be teaching all of us one day too. I'm curious what you've seen with the evolution of that, how inspiring it is, and how gratifying it is to be a part of it.
Oh, yes, it's great. And, there are parallels to when I was a kid. So we didn't call it STEM, but, math was important. And my mom would always say, there are going to be jobs in 15 years we don't know about yet. And it's the same thing now. There's always new evolving things. So getting a foundation where science and technology and math help you to have that foundation. So whatever opportunity comes down your road, you can grab it. Obviously, working with people and communicating and writing, those are all important things, but just having that well-rounded and the curiosity to go figure things out. I'm really excited for the next generation.
The math has never changed, right? I mean, maybe the tools and technology we have changed, but math is still extremely important. I think, at least, I was a terrible science student, but math and the ability to write, like, just start there, and it's probably going to be involved in something that you're doing. And then, you're with your background and what you've done in digital health. That again is something that I think feels newer to a lot of us to hear about that. Of course, it's been around a long time, but evolving. How slow, how quick has the evolution been, and how much further are we going? I guess it never ends.
Yes. Well, digital health, those words are newer. Healthcare IT is what we were talking. So going back to 79 with Cerner's founding, NetSmart's roots are even older. So these are a lot of decades of expertise that we're building here in the Kansas City region. And so a couple of years ago, we had this epiphany with as part of BioNexus KC, which is charged with convening different aspects within the life sciences space, which digital health is in, that we have this really deep and wide presence that this should be the place that you do digital health. So some of it's marketing, but it's also how do you create an ecosystem where people are helping each other connect the ideas to the companies, to the capital, to the customers, and have a kind of a node, which is digital health KC, connect those points.
I know the world has changed we're hearing the Cerner name less and less, and that's the way the world works too. But I mean, I moved here in '08, had the opportunity to speak a little bit over there as well. It was I wouldn't say it was overwhelming. It was just to think about. I think I spoke to like 1% of the people there, when I went in there and spoke in one of the theaters at one of the buildings. But can you talk a little bit about the experience of having been there, the impact, of the Neil Pattersons, the Cliff Illigs, and how groundbreaking was it? What I don't know if springboard is the right word, what that did for where we're at now.
Well, and I think it's an exciting time because anytime you have change, you have opportunity. And you had such great people come through Cerner and great leaders. They did a lot of talent development. So when I exited Orbis and I was working with entrepreneurs, and I would look at, where did all my friends go? And I could connect people to a lot of places across the country because that alumni network is just so valuable. So it was a very attractive place to go to work, a lot of opportunity there. And then what you see is this very vibrant alumni network. So that's one of the strengths that we have that we're trying to capture with digital health, Casey. And like, what's the next era? What does the next 10, 20 years bring? And some of that should be a concerted effort to really maximize the potential, which is why we've spent so much time on that.
So what does the next 10 or 20 years bring?
So our charge is, can we develop the next 10 unicorns that come out of this really fertile ecosystem? And part of that is that connecting it to capital and different elements that might be harder to find. And we set the number at 125 companies. And when we set that number, we were at 70. Now we're over 100 companies. So, it's a forest where you get these really tall trees, but you need the saplings and the, growing trees, and you need the resources so that there are lots of opportunity for the next trees to come up behind them.
So this is all about, I know how important mentorship is to you. It's not all about mentorship. It's a pretty big piece to it, right? I mean, if you're talking about kids not knowing or the jobs that they'll have potentially in 10 to 15 years. Anita Newton, another member of Women Who Mean Business, said some version of that to me on the podcast as well. It's incredibly exciting to think about, right? I mean, I think about it. I'm not in your space, just have begun dabbling in entrepreneurship, as I told you, but I sit there and think about my background a little bit. I wanted to be on TV. I'm actually that rare person that is doing what they wanted to do. But then again, if I were to go back to, say, the 80s and say, you are going to host a pre and post game show and be an in-game reporter for a Major League Baseball team, I'd say the only thing that I know about that is Major League Baseball. What's a pregame show host? There were no pregames. Oh, by the way, you're going to host a podcast. What is that? So that's just stuff, in recent years. Podcasting now feels like everybody's doing it. Blogging, on and on. I'm just talking about my world. How do you create those 10 unicorns, and how important is that mentorship along the way?
And I think mentor is the great place to start because it asks all the right questions and it connects you to different resources. So you need a lot of different elements. Thinking about the forest, you need good soil, you need water, you need sunlight. And when you don't have one of those things, then you can't grow. So one of the things that we've made progress over the years, but we're still room to grow, is access to capital. And how I'm looking at that is it doesn't have to be here in town, but it needs to be, to be able to connect to it. So from a mentoring perspective, who are the people that are 2 years ahead of you who have been successful in that? Who can they introduce you to? Who are the people that, are even farther down their career or even earlier in their career? You can get mentorship from like so many different places. So how I write about in the book is, go all in on one mentor that you're investing a lot, but then also have a suite of advisors so that when a problem comes up, you've got a lot of places that you can go to see how they've approached solving a problem.
All right, I was about to go there, so let's go there a little bit deeper. The book, Make Opportunity Happen. Tell me about. I'm always interested in this, having now written one and working on a second. the process. What was the process like for you in writing it?
Well, and how it started, when you're an entrepreneur, you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about things. Your mind is constantly going. And so then after you sell your company, that doesn't stop. Your mind is still doing that. But I went from thinking about my problems and opportunities to thinking about other entrepreneurs. And so I'd get up in the middle of the night and start writing these things down because they were just, I needed to get back to sleep. And then I would find myself repeating some of those stories. And that's where I think there's a book here. And it was a little bit of a puzzle. I didn't know what form it would really take. But it was a very meaningful process because it's a lot of self-reflection and really thinking, how can I make this valuable to other entrepreneurs? So it was an entrepreneurial process of market testing. And now I'm in the launch and promotion phase. So the creation is very fulfilling. And then I found a lot of great people to work with along the way and mentoring, like those people that are 2 years ahead of me. How have they been successful? What things have they learned? So that's been really fun.
I know it has to be rewarding to put so much of that out there, knowing that you can impact young entrepreneurs. By the way, it could be older entrepreneurs too. There's no age limit for being an entrepreneur. Shoot, we could see a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a teenager, if they pick up a book, by the way. But we could see them being entrepreneurs. We could see somebody finding it at 70 years old, 80 years old. I would imagine you've heard from a lot of people, whether in the business or wanting to get into the world of entrepreneurship, and imagine that has been extremely rewarding.
Yes, and there's data out there that says 1 out of 5 Americans has started a business in the last few years. So it could be something on the side or they're all in. But a lot of times it's new territory. And how I've heard it talked about before is, I know my space really well, but this is like I've been dropped in a foreign country and I'm looking at the menu and I don't know what these words mean. So that's what I'm hoping this is a guidebook to help fast track some of these topics. And then plus you are so strapped for time. There are so many books that you should read that you just don't have time. Mm-hmm. So can it be a primer to get you started?
Let's dig in a little bit deeper on the amount of new entrepreneurs, businesses starting. I mean, my mind immediately goes to the pandemic. My mind always goes to the pandemic with where we're at today, because where we're at today is completely different than 5 years ago. That's true in every walk of life, and the way we are in the office or out of the office, and baseball's different and communication's different, and on and on. Is that the biggest reason, or why do you think that there's been such an uptick?
Well, I think it's something that's always available to you, but it goes back to that. You got to see it to be it. And when I graduated from my MBA in my 20s, not that old.
No, you're not. I didn't think twice about that one. So,
but when I was in my 20s, and so our first day of class was 9/11. 2001. Mm-hmm. So it was, we're investing a lot in this program. Are there going to be jobs available to us? That was the mindset. And I thought, well, I'm grooming myself to be an entrepreneur. I could just go do that. But the mindset at that time was that you need to go get seasoned and trained, and don't go do this now. And then when Mark Zuckerberg arrived on the scene, then it was different, and it was okay to be young and an entrepreneur. In fact, if people took a survey, they would probably say most entrepreneurs are young, but depending on what survey you look at, it's average age of 39 or 43, and you just don't know how your interests change or your life circumstances change. But entrepreneurship is always something that's available to you. But if you haven't done it before, that's where some of the tools and the mentoring can help you fast track when it's a new area that you're getting into.
It's so fascinating to me because there's so much opportunity out there right now that, again, I mean, I guess that's always been the case. It just feels like there's more at our fingertips than ever before. We have to potentially learn it, be exposed to it, understand it. Not everybody is aware, and not everything fits for everyone either. You said something before about change leading to opportunity. I so strongly believe in that, and I'll go back to the pandemic, and I think I was probably too young for I was old enough for 9/11, but I was too young to think about it, at least for me, in terms of change. You know, I was still at that sort of just going about my business. You know, I'm still doing television. And I think I was 2 days before 9/11, I was out east covering a football game, and was pretty close to where everything had happened. And you know, now I'm at that age where you think deeper about everything. And so when the financial crisis hits, you know, '08, how is that going to change things? When the pandemic, it's survive, and then how is it going to change things? But what I kept thinking about, Maria, during the pandemic, as a guy, I've told this here on the podcast before, as a guy that is paid by the baseball game. If you remember, there were no baseball games. We had 60 instead of 162 that year. I had a speaking business. Nobody was hiring speakers, even virtually at that point. All I had was this podcast, which was bringing in a little bit of revenue at that point, and that was it. And I thought, there's got to be opportunity here, at least opportunity to start connecting with more people, to be able to tell other people's stories that don't sit and wait until it's over. Because I think that the people that keep on moving forward end up getting ahead. I'm curious your thought on that, because there'll be something else. There always is. And whether that's this being an election year and who knows where things are going, there's always uncertainty. There's always change. What is it about change that is so ripe for opportunity?
Well, in the speaking that I do, launching off the book, one of the big themes is take the crack of opportunity in the door and push it wide open. And sometimes that door feels completely shut, but there is always a crack of opportunity. It's just how creative do you need to be to find it? And thinking back to the pandemic, you know, it's really remarkable how relatively easy it was to come through that. And but even if it's not a big global event like that, a personal health issue or an accident or something, you know, there's always things that can happen. And it's just how do you look at it? And that's where, I don't know if it was growing up on a farm or just the way my family was, but it was a glass half full mentality. There's there's always a silver lining in there. And really, when things are hard, finding that, grabbing onto that, and then maximizing it, which if you think of the door, you know, pushing it as far open as you can.
I love that. And by the way, that is entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
I mean, every single day. One of the things that I'm always interested in, you know, go back to your early years and all of this. I mean, you're established now, not that there isn't risk in what you're doing. And I think, you know, everybody has their different levels of risk. I always feel like the really successful entrepreneurs can handle that risk. But I'm always fascinated by the safety net or the lack thereof, especially for someone that's new at it. I mean, I would imagine you've built yourself some safety net. For me, my entrepreneurship was, well, if this doesn't work, I still have baseball. And so I was trying to do both at the same time, but it wasn't life and death, so to speak, in terms of getting it right. That gave me a little bit of freedom and a little bit of flexibility to not have to, I don't know, sometimes you cut corners when you're desperate, which I would suggest you shouldn't, you know, trust the process, all that type of good stuff. How are you with taking that leap of faith? And what do you say to those newer entrepreneurs that have the passion for something, that this is what they want to do, but that leap of faith is awfully scary?
There's definitely a leap of faith that's in every entrepreneurial endeavor. And there's a continued leap of faith. So when you study some of the greats, a lot of times you take the right risk choices, and then later on you stop because you're building something bigger and it's harder to keep taking those risks. That said, I think a lot of times people say, you know, entrepreneurs are such risk takers. And I see smart entrepreneurs having contingencies, having cash reserves, having plan B. When they say burn the boats, you know, that's not the world that I've lived in. I've had to have lots of alternative plans because things come up and you have to adjust. And that's just part of the game. And so about a fourth of the book is about adjusting and what are the signals that you need to listen to? What are the ones that you should ignore? That's really difficult things to understand, because sometimes you hear this voice and you think that's the right one, but it's not. So how do you come up with experiments to keep you safe and going the right direction?
It's really interesting too, right? The good old trust your gut. Well, what if your gut is giving you the wrong opinion? And also a really good point there too, that not every entrepreneur is wired the same, which of course would make sense. And so you can be a risk taker while still having plan A, plan B, plan C. Again, I'll go back to baseball a little bit on this, that these guys are all successful in different ways. And, we have a pitcher right now on the Royals, Seth Lugo, who they really applaud for his preparation. And he doesn't just have a plan A. It's a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. For every single hitter, they say his preparation and the meetings in advance of his starts are unlike anybody else's. And maybe the next guy's totally different. And so this is not a one size fits all. It never has been in entrepreneurship. I guess part of the message is finding some of those secrets, so to speak, that will apply across the board.
Right. And that's a great example. So if you know that, and there's some tips you can get from him, that why don't you grab those? But everybody has their own path, and allowing for that.
When in the midst of everything that you're doing, what gives you the greatest joy? And maybe it's all of it. Maybe if it can't be all of it. There are things that are keeping you up at night and all that. But there's so many elements to this that you're involved in. What fills your cup?
So definitely the blank page and the what if, when you're starting these things, and even, creating a book, what could it be? Creating Digital Health KC, what could it be? But then when you actually see it working, and the evidence of, because we made this connection, then this happened. That's really fulfilling of, had I not had my fingerprint there, then that wouldn't have happened. That's fulfilling.
Like the other question I wanted to ask you before we get to the baseball theme questions, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Pipeline. Not everybody knows about Pipeline, but it feels like, so it's my shout out certainly to Melissa and the great work that she does, and the incredible collection of people involved, like yourself over there. But what is it about Kansas City right now that has become this hotbed for technology and innovation? What it feels like we're either in or approaching a golden era. You've got a better feel on this than me. What is making this area so attractive to so many people?
Well, I think it's putting a spotlight on the things that we have. So sometimes we're head down, working hard, that we forget to look up and kind of shout from the rooftops what we have. And what started Digital Health KC, I went to an investor conference, and there was somebody who invested in digital health who liked markets like Salt Lake City and Minneapolis, Nashville, Research Triangle Park. And they didn't mention Kansas City, and we should have been on that list. And I thought, that's interesting. Is it just a marketing problem, or, what's going on here? So I think some of it is making it known. Some of it, we've been working on this a long time. So Pipeline's 17, 18 years old. So it's these incremental improvements each year. And then, next thing you know, you've got a really nice ecosystem of a lot of entrepreneurs that are helping each other in a variety of industries. But then you also have some clusters, cybersecurity, some other areas that, you've got nice concentration.
And then last one before the baseball themed questions. Tell me a little bit more about the company and the impact, what you guys are trying to do. I know that this is not one simple thing too. On the website, by the way, Ambiologix.com, Ambiologix. It'll be in the show notes if everybody wants to check it out. Starting, building, scaling, and selling. Tell me a little bit more.
So really, that is taking my experience from Orbis Biosciences and Cerner and helping other entrepreneurs on their path. So I've worked with over 40 entrepreneurs and their companies in the last few years. The book is part of that. How do I help them go farther, faster, is what we do.
Very important, and I know gratifying work to be able to see all of that happen and the successes. All right, baseball themed questions, and I know you've had a lot of home runs. You may not talk about all of them because I know that you're humble about it. But what has been your biggest home run?
To date, it is Orbis being acquired by Adair, because it was 12-year run, and there was a lot of perseverance and grit needed to get to that stage. So it's not just hitting the milestone, it's the evolution and the drive along the way.
That moment when it becomes official,
Yes.
I know it doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. It's a long road, but how do you remember? How do you describe that feeling emotionally?
Well, and we were supposed to close March 31st of 2020, and we got the call that it was going to be bumped till April 30th. But those were very trying times. So very stressful, huge weight off your shoulders that we had to cross that finish line. And I had always heard friends who had sold their company say, you build it up and then it's not as exciting. And particularly we're doing Zoom toasts. There was no getting together in that time. But it just a huge weight off that we had made it.
Zoom toasts. I was going to say the good old days. I don't know whether they were good old days, but that will forever bring back memories, no doubt about it. Let's have a Zoom happy hour. All right, a swing and a miss, and I know that entrepreneurs have plenty of them. Swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
So in the book, I said I couldn't have this book without having a section on failing, and it was my hardest to write because every time when I looked at my failures, I didn't think of them as failures. They just taught me what to do next. But the thing that I did write about was after I left Adair, who had acquired Orbis, I went into Techstars, Kansas City, and I was only there about 7-8 months, and they decided to leave Kansas City. So that definitely felt like a swing and a miss. But it also taught me that I really love the work of working with entrepreneurs. So it was that's what I learned. And then also there are things that you can't control. As many safety factors and redundancies that you'd like to be put into place, there are things you can't control. And so that was just part of life.
It's such an obvious statement, right? I mean, I use it a lot, control the controllable. Everybody knows it. It's one thing to know it. It's another thing to kind of live it. We get so obsessed with things that we look back afterwards and realize it was a waste of our time. And I think there's a skill in identifying what that is and not letting it slow you down.
Right. But it's also freeing knowing that, the world has to meet you. You can do all that you can, but opportunity has to meet you. But if you can learn earlier, like this isn't going to work, move on, then that's helpful. So there are even still some things you can do, but at the end of the day, the world has to meet you where you are.
Yep. Well said. Last one, small ball. What are the little things that matter to you that lead to success every day?
So my mindset, something that helped me at Orbis, and I work with my entrepreneurs is, what are your top 3? What are your top 3 this week? What are your top 3 today? And chunking them in manageable chunks, because we always are very, big thinkers. And a lot of times you don't stop at 3 or 4, 5, 6, but like 3 things you're going to do today. And it just gets the momentum going.
I like that. Really on a lot of levels too, right? I mean, we get inundated with our lists.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them we don't even get to write down because our brains just keep going and going, but having that focus, a little bit of that focus, and you could break it down to year, month, week, day, hour, or whatever it is. Okay, let's get to the 4 final questions as we round the bases. The first one, can you explain the meaning behind Ambiologix?
Yes. So it means around logic. And most of my career has a bio component. So I liked that, but really around logic.
And I'll remind everybody, Ambiologix.com. And there's plenty there about everything that's going on with Maria. Okay. Second question, as we round the bases, we talked a little bit about exiting and what that meant. I want to ask you more about scaling. And I know we've talked a little bit about some of that process, but how much you enjoy that piece of it, and what advice you have for young entrepreneurs out there as they start to find that success and need to start to scale.
Yes. So after you've determined you've got product market fit, and it's about throwing more gas on the fire, and it's the team that you put around you. So really finding those people that can do excellent work and letting them do their work. So having a structure and a culture in place that attracts that kind of a person. that's where I think spending a lot of time into really finding and supporting the right team.
All right, third question as we round the bases, and looking back at your career, the time at Orbis, and beyond, there were a couple of pieces that were really interesting to me in terms of some big moments. One was um, being involved in patenting numerous technologies and including extended release time drugs, helping a lot of throat cancer patients. And then another one that was interesting to me was working with Wrigley on technologies, creating flavor change in gum. These are the type of things that I think people wouldn't assume that someone working in innovation and technology and someone that is very successful like yourself is doing. What were both of those projects? I know that they're different. What kind of meaning did they have to you, and how gratifying, how satisfying was it?
Well, and it really goes back to the why of why Orbis was created, and it was to improve pharmaceuticals. But along the way, because we were started in end of 2008, we needed our funding to go as far as it could. So when you had partners like Wrigley that you could work with, you could get cash in the door. You could learn that project did not continue. It was not successful, but it taught us insight to apply to oral drugs, and that's one of the interesting learnings was. You never know what things will lead to. And had we not done the project with Wrigley, then we would not have had that innovation that propelled us later in the oral space.
So one thing often leads to another, or to a different path, right?
Right.
To down a different road, which again is so much part of entrepreneurship. All right, we'll go with a fun one for the last one. I saw that you have traveled to, I think I saw 29 different countries. Is that a work? Is that a pleasure? Is that both? And what are some of your favorites?
It's mostly pleasure. I did work in Egypt as an engineer, and that kind of sparked my desire to see a lot of different places. But you just get such interesting experience going into different cultures. I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
Any favorites? And any favorites and any bucket list? There has to be bucket list.
Yes. So I haven't been to Portugal or Croatia, so that's high on my list. And New Zealand is probably one of my favorites.
I've heard nothing but great things. Have not been to any of those yet. They're all on my list, actually. So I'd like to add all of those as well. Hey, quick final follow-up before we wrap things up. Any observations as you've gone overseas to different cultures? The culture piece to me is the greatest part, because just fascinating to see the way different communities and cultures interact. And I've been lucky enough to see that in third world countries in Africa, to be able to see that in the off season in Bogota, Colombia, and to see the hospitality and the way people go about life and business and entrepreneurship. Does it all look the same all over the world? Are there differences?
There are differences. And so one of the things that's interesting is in Africa, and how empowering some of the women can really affect a lot of change. And so I'm really inspired by some of the investments that have went in to help women get to the next level and impact their communities. But there's a lot of growth that can happen over the next decades.
It's fascinating stuff. Every bit of it, I would highly recommend to everyone out there, especially aspiring entrepreneurs or anyone that wants to consider that. Get that guide. Make Opportunity Happen, the Entrepreneur's Guide to Align Your Own Stars. You could find out about Ambiologix as well, Ambiologix.com. Maria, thanks so much for spending time. Congratulations on all of your success and the impact you're having on the success of others. Keep up the great work, and thanks for spending time on Rounding the Bases.
Thank you so much.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.